This flipped learning activity is based on the poem Poppies by Jane Weir, which is from the AQA English Literature Anthology Power and Conflict section. And it's one of the 15 poems within that section. In this activity, the aim is to read and develop some understanding of the poem that will enable you to deal with it in greater depth in class. The outcomes are 6 quick questions which you need to answer and bring with you to your English lesson. The poem itself is fairly contemporary. It was commissioned by Carol Ann Duffy, the then Poet Laureate, as part of a collection of poems published in 2009. The poem was written from a woman's perspective and from the perspective of a mother who is sending her son off into the army. As the poet herself writes, she was thinking of Susan Owen, the mother of Wilfred Owen, and other mothers in that situation. So in comparison to some of the other poems in the collection, there's quite a contrast. 3 days before Armistice Sunday, and poppies had already been placed on individual war graves. Before you left, I pinned one onto your lapel. Crimped petals, spasms of paper red, disrupting a blockade of yellow bias binding around your blazer. In that opening stanza, the voice of the poem is recollecting about this moment when she sends her son off into the army. Significantly, it is just before Armistice Sunday, so there's a time of remembrance and a time of remembering loss. Poppies clearly symbolise that all the way through this poem, and of course is the title of the poem. In this opening stanza we get a sense of mothering and caring for her son, understandably. There is the alliteration there with bias, binding, blunder, which kind of emphasises the way that she is caring for her son, who is about to depart from her into the world. There is also the beginning of a chain of military language, and in this case perhaps that blockade could be linked into ideas of her having to hold back and blockade her own emotions at this point. Sellotape bandaged around my hand, I rounded up as many white cat hairs as I could, smoothed down your shirt's upturned collar, steeled the softening of my face. I wanted to graze my nose across the tip of your nose, play at being Eskimos like we did when you were little. I resisted the impulse to run my fingers through your gelled blackthorns of your hair. All my words flattened, rolled, turned into felt, slowly melting. This stanza continues describing the scene from stanza 1. There's a strong sense of nostalgia, but also of the mother trying to hold back her emotions. There are 2 questions there that we would like you to answer. One about the bandage and the connotations, the ideas linked to that, to her emotions, but also to bear in mind the fact that her son is heading off into active service. We'd also like you to talk about the effect of the repetition of the S sound in that sentence. I was brave as I walked with you to the front door, threw it open, the world overflowing like a treasure chest. A split second and you were away, intoxicated. After you'd gone, I went into your bedroom, released a songbird from its cage. Later, a single dove flew from the pear tree, and this is where it has led me, skirting the churchyard walls, my stomach busy making tucks, darts, pleats, hatless without a winter coat or reinforcements of scarf, gloves. Now, the mother has let her son go, and he has left the house. There's a theme of birds and bird imagery which is introduced into this stanza. Birds, conventionally in literature and art, are often used to symbolise freedom, hence the songbird being released from its cage. So perhaps that's suggesting something to us about how her son feels about this opportunity. He's seeing this as something different to her. She then describes how she goes for a walk and finds her way out to the churchyard walls, having followed a dove there. Now there are two more questions for you. The first one is about the treasure chest and what that suggests about her son's feelings about the world. And the second one is specifically about the dove, because birds are often linked to ideas of freedom, but the dove is linked to other things as well. So we're asking, what might that represent? In the final stanza, she continues her walk and then finds herself at the top of the hill by the War Memorial. On reaching the top of the hill, I traced the inscriptions on the War Memorial, leaned against it like a wishbone. The dove pulled freely against the sky, an ornamental stitch. I listened, hoping to hear your playground voice catching on the wind. Now the poem ends in an interesting way, with the mother in a situation where clearly she's being reminded of the possible consequences of what might happen, and perhaps a sense of loss and again more nostalgia, whilst her son's response potentially is different. Once again we have reference to the dove pulling freely against the sky, this idea of freedom and of release. So there are two further questions we would like you to answer there. One about the simile, the comparison to a wishbone, and what it suggests about her state, her thoughts, her feelings, her wants at this point. And then the ornamental stitch, what can we say about that particular image there? That should hopefully have given you some introduction to the poetry, and please make sure that you arrive at your lesson with the answers to those 6 questions ready.